This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Whether you need hosting for your art portfolio or online store, Squarespace has all the website building, marketing, and analytics tools you need to build a sleek website and grow your brand. Water. Fire.
That can't be it. Where's the rest of it?
Hello my girlies, and welcome to another episode of Personifying Abstract Concepts. Last week I made a video where I designed goddesses or magical girls based on fire and water, so this week I'm going to be tackling earth and air. If you haven't seen that video, what are you doing? You should go and watch it after this one because I think it's pretty good. After a week of letting the previous designs sink in, I already have some ideas of some different things I want to do with the next two. As much as I love how the first two came out, and I do think they're pretty iconic, I do want to try to take earth and air in a more original direction. Earth and air feel like very nature-based concepts to me, so I want them to feel very organic and connected to the earth itself. So I want them to have even more of a focus on animal companions. I want to lean even harder into the goddess angle, and I really want them to embody the concepts themselves. You look at this woman, she is air, she is invisible, you can't see her. So take a look at my mood boards real quick. For air, I have a lot of aesthetics that are sort of focused on the sky and like avian imagery, just a lot of birds, and then costuming that's also inspired by like ballet and figure skating, and a lot of soft pastel colors. And then for earth, I was really inspired by like the idea of Mother Nature, and not just like rocks, but also like plants and wildlife. I think by really leaning into like plants and animals and not just rocks, it's definitely going to diverge from like Avatar: The Last Airbender Earth and really become its own character. So I already know I did some thumbnails for earth and air in the previous video, but to iterate on the designs even more, I did another thumbnailing pass for the two, this time really focusing on silhouette and trying to get the designs as close to my finished vision as possible. I was especially not feeling air's design much in the first version of the thumbnail. I actually started working on the illustration piece for her, but scrapped it because I just wasn't happy with it. So I went more for pastel colors for her this time around, inspired by colors of the sky, and just generally tried to make the design softer and more bird-like, since owls and swans were heavy inspiration for her character. Earth stayed mostly the same, but I tried to add bigger shapes inspired by driftwood or stones to her as armor, and also some greenery growing off of her, since no earth character is complete without becoming a literal plant. And I also tried to make her look more mature and graceful, especially in her clothing style, because those are the things that I think of whenever I think of Mother Nature. I really was not in love with the earth design at first, but I think doing this iteration helped me to warm up to the concept at least a little bit. I've mentioned over the past few videos that a goal of mine in 2022 is to expand my portfolio and work on polishing my illustrations, and I've been talking a lot about the learning side of that, but I also need a place to put my portfolio. Luckily, this video is sponsored by Squarespace. Whenever I've tried to set up portfolio websites in the past, it always took a couple of days to set up and get it to look how I wanted, and in the end it was really hard to add art to the website, but Squarespace's website building tools helped me to set up my portfolio website and link my store in under an hour. Squarespace has dozens of gorgeous professional templates to choose from, made specifically with portfolios, e-commerce merchants, and artists in mind. I'm very into portfolios that focus on the work itself, so the one I chose is very minimalist and clean, and I think it looks really nice. It helps my illustrations to stand out. Thanks to Squarespace's automatic image scaling, whenever I uploaded a collection of my portfolio pieces to the site, everything was instantly scaled and arranged to showcase and organize my work. I was also able to link my print-on-demand service directly to Squarespace thanks to their e-commerce platform, which means that my shop and portfolio are now in one convenient location. And another goal of mine this year is to begin selling my artwork at conventions, which Squarespace is also great for, because when you sell in person, they keep your inventory and sales data in sync with your online store. It is an all-around great platform for anyone looking to launch their passion project this year, so if you want to check it out, head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, head to squarespace.com/pricklyalpaca to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. A huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get designing. So as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to try to push the originality of this design. So for Air, I was really inspired by ballet and figure skating costumes, especially costuming for Swan Lake. I've been watching figure skating on the Olympics because it's my favorite sport, and there were some really gorgeous costumes this year, so I wanted that to influence this design. So to lean into that Swan Lake inspiration, the main design I ended up going for was heavily inspired by the Barbie Swan Lake dress, which feel free to roast me in the comments, is absolutely gorgeous, and I kind of want to make a cosplay of it, not gonna lie. The inspiration mainly comes in on the poofy sleeves and the colors, since I didn't want to copy the design too much, but I think it still shows. On the Swan Lake theme, I obviously took a lot of inspiration from avian and angel motifs, so I tried to give her basically wings, but not wings. I designed them to look like a big cloak or an evening wrap that attaches to her fingers to mimic the shape of wings. I'm not sure how well it reads in the final illustration because I had a lot of difficulty rendering the wings, but I think if someone were to physically make the design, it would look very majestic. Once again, my thumbnails are kind of reading better than the finished designs because I'm in a weird transitional place with my art style where I'm struggling to render fabric a lot, but I guess this is good practice for that. To match the wings, I also gave her little puffy tulle sleeves and a collar, and by the end, I also gave the wings a matching burb tail because I thought it rounded out the design. This character just has a lot of intense burb energy in general. But to follow the ballet trends, I ended up making the main garment a leotard. It's not armor this time, so I don't hate it. And I also added some light gold armor here and there to elevate the design a bit, including a little headpiece with some burb feathers. This was also incredibly difficult for me to render and make work logistically, especially the shoulder pieces. I know if I sat down and figured it out, I could make it articulate properly, but it ended up being pretty messy in this illustration, unfortunately. But I do like the style and idea behind the pieces themselves. At least the leg armor and the waist piece have kind of nice rendering, right? I once again pulled some inspiration from Wonder Woman for the armor in this design, but I think it works well since she and Fire have powers that work in tandem with each other. I've mentioned in the past that I like to visually link characters that are related to each other, so this is a pretty good example of that. The general idea for this design was also heavily inspired by this illustration. So for face reference, I tried to find a cute K-pop girl with pink hair. Here are some references that I used. Sadly, I don't know who any of them are because I don't really K-pop, but here is some food for those of you who are stans. As much as I tried to use reference for the face rendering in this piece really got away from me. In the end, I'm still not super satisfied with it because I think she lost a lot of her softness, but again, I guess it's something for me to work on. Likeness is still hit or miss for me sometimes, honestly. I've also been wanting to challenge myself to draw different body types lately, so even though I wanted to make this character slender, I wanted her to have slender features that aren't represented as often, like wider shoulders, hip dips, and a smaller chest. I really struggled to draw the hip dips because of the pose. Hip dips are kind of like difficult for me to draw in general, even though I do have hip dips, but little anatomical details like this are great if you want to design characters with a unique body type. It sounds weird to say, but I feel like a lot of us just automatically give characters the same proportions, but real people, even if they have the same general quote-unquote body type, can have wildly different proportions depending on their bone structure and a lot of like genetic things. So paying attention to those details can really help you to crush some of that same body syndrome that a lot of us tend to fall into. Also, for any artists out there taking design notes from these videos, I want to reiterate that whenever I do full illustrations like this, it's mostly for illustration practice, since it's something that I'm trying to work on this year, especially since my character designs are geared towards illustrations and not comics or animation. For best results, I recommend just rough sketching your character designs first instead of trying to design them in a full piece, because it's way easier to iterate on your idea and change the design if you're sketching, especially whenever you don't have rendering or shading to worry about. Full pieces are great for whenever you want to make a piece of concept art that demonstrates the full extent of an idea whenever you've already spent some time on it, which is why I do little thumbnails and little sketches off screen at the beginning of these videos at the very least, so that I have some time to explore an idea before attempting a full piece. I just wanted to clarify that my normal design process for a character is much more iterative. I think my Spider Sona video is pretty good representation of how I normally work. If you're designing a character seriously, one that is for a work of fiction or something like that, you really want to like write the character first for the most part, because so many visual things with your character should should be informed by good writing and good storytelling. These videos are mostly like character design practice. So their utility is learning, not so much for being used in an actual story. Anyways, like I said in part 1, whenever I do magical girl designs, I try to let the powers and themes of my character influence the design itself. For this one, I didn't have an idea right off the bat. I kind of found my ideas along the way. So to me, air very much represents freedom, living in the moment, going with the flow of life. And so I wanted this character to be the goddess of movement, youth, and spontaneity, and for her powers to be to flow with and manipulate air and wind, allowing her to basically teleport or fly. This power set is kind of inspired by how Ruby Rose's speed powers in Ruby work. She kind of turns into like a chunk of rose petals and whips around. I think this character would be able to turn into like a gust of wind and quickly teleport wherever she would need to go. And this would allow her to manipulate wind as well. I also think she would have some special connection with creatures that fly or dwell in the air, so she would be able to like communicate with birds and insects, and I think it would also be hilarious if she could like command large flocks of birds to do her bidding. I find birds to be like kind of intimidating, like large flocks of birds, and it also kind of reminds me of that one miraculous ladybug character. So some weird mix of hilarious and horrifying. So I mentioned that she would basically partner with fire if they were to fight in combat. I think she would be able to make fire powers stronger and faster, especially teleporting like a flame blast to its target or something like that. I think if the two were to have like an ultimate combo attack, it would basically be like a giant flaming wall of wind, which, like, hello, speaking of intimidating, that's terrifying too. Also, I think it would be really cool if fire would be able to turn one of air's burbs into like a phoenix for a period of time during battle, so that the burb could spread fire attacks, and then the bird would basically like burn and return to a normal bird afterwards, kind of like a phoenix being born again, but instead of a phoenix, it's just a regular bird. Imagine a pigeon just like completely wrecking a bunch of villains. This is the potential we're working with here. Video game companies, call me. I'll sell you my ideas. Consider battle pigeons? I got a million of these, you guys. Come on. Anyways, those are my kooky ideas for Air. I think that she's a pretty cool character, and I'm pretty happy with how the design came out. And now let's move on to our final girl, which is Earth. Was probably the most difficult girl for me visually. In so many mediums, Earth either represents rocks or plants, but I wanted this character to be associated with rocks, plants, dirt, bugs, animals, basically the works. She's very much inspired by the idea of Mother Nature, and I wanted her to have a connection to most things that are from the planet, excluding burbs, which are Air's domain. So I wanted her design to reflect that, which meant that I'd have to find common ground visually between the rigid, square-shaped language of rocks and the more organic look of plants and animals. I didn't want to go fully organic and fully Batman and Robin, Poison Ivy, because I was seeing a lot of that on Pinterest, but I didn't want to lean fully into rocks or the typical wood elf thing either. So I planned on my idea basically living somewhere between all of those other concepts. Over the years, my character design has been inspired a lot by video game character design, even though I'm like barely a gamer, but I'm especially inspired by stuff like Overwatch, where the characters are heavily driven by bold shapes and strong silhouettes, so I tried to go about using a similar process here. As you could see from the first two thumbnails I did, my design was largely based around these two long sleeves that would fill out the silhouette and look like leaves. For these designs, I wanted to make gown-inspired garments that weren't quite gowns and a little bit more original, so I think having wild sleeves or like with Air fabrics that are draped more on the upper body was a fun idea to play around with for these two characters. After I knew that the sleeves would be the main part of the design, I wanted to fill it out with some armor, and for these characters I kind of took an anti-armor approach where it looks like armor but it isn't functionally armor, which isn't practical, but it gave me a lot of license to play around with weird shapes and really give the impression that these aren't earthly beings that would even need real armor, but they are warriors, so they have that armor imagery in their designs. And I think that also falls in line a lot with the design mentality for like minor gods and goddesses, especially from Marvel or DC, which I noted were big inspirations for these designs. So for Earth's armor, I followed a similar idea that I used for Oak's armor from my Tree Knights video, and I made the armor resemble wood, but I wanted the shapes and rendering to be reminiscent of both wood and stone, so I kind of referenced how driftwood looks and flows because I thought it was a good middle ground between the two. I had the idea to give her some pretty wild puffy sleeves and then wrap them in some wild pauldrons along with a headpiece and some greaves. I wanted it to not make sense, kind of how roots grow in such a mangled way in the forest. I wanted it to look like this armor sort of just grew onto her and she didn't have much control over it. I wanted the headpiece to look like twisted tree limbs, but also antlers since she's so connected to the forest and the creatures in the forest, and for the leg armor to look like she could have just peeled it right off a tree. I have a bad habit of making my character designs overcrowded and wild, so whenever it came to the blue bits of her dress, I wasn't sure exactly what to put there to avoid overcrowding. I played around with a leaf pattern at first, but ultimately I settled on some moss on her skirt, which ended up fitting pretty well with the rest of the design. I think it was a rather restrained choice, and I am proud of myself. These are the small victories of a textbook maximalist. The design is generally pretty chaotic and nonsensical, but it comes together to be oddly cohesive, which ain't that just nature, you know? In terms of powers, I wanted her to be really connected to living things, so she would be goddess of growth, nature, and the present, and I'm thinking her main abilities would involve telepathy and illusion. If air is about moving and flowing in the moment and moving quickly, earth is about being grounded and taking a moment to breathe and slow down. So along with the abilities to manipulate rocks, plants, and wildlife, I think she would be able to meditate in an attempt to enter an enemy's mind during battle and essentially talk no jutsu them into ending the fight. She's very much a nature-loving, pacifistic person who sees the good in people and likes philosophy, so she would be more inclined to talk things out in a mind space where violence isn't even possible. However, while doing this, she would have to meditate and stop fighting to keep focused, and she would only be able to trap one enemy at once. In addition to talk no jutsu, she would also be able to give the team a telepathic link during fights in order to coordinate attacks, and she would also have a telepathic link with animals and plants. For her primary team attack, she would be able to partner with water to make her plant power stronger and trap enemies and create giant tidal waves and tsunamis. The primary team attacks would be fire and air and earth and water, but water and fire can team up to create boiling water, gas attacks, and even light combustion if water is heated enough to separate and ignite hydrogen. Fire and earth, on the other hand, can combine to create lava and glass attacks and slightly accelerate the growth of Earth's plants due to fire's healing and heat powers. And finally, air and water can combine to create fog, ice, and simulate weather to create small storms and tornadoes. I'm sure you could combine their powers in a lot of different ways, so Future Kira made a chart. Here it is. And with that, we're finished with all 4 elemental girls. Here are the finished designs for Air and Earth. I did have a lot of struggles rendering both Air and Earth's illustrations in this video. Air especially was kind of rough, and I'm not really sure what went wrong there. I feel like the composition didn't quite come together how I planned, but hey, at least it's real shiny. Earth took a good bit of rendering, but I finally got her looking how I wanted. I actually really like how it came out. The insane lighting choices for Earth probably didn't help, but I am looking to improve my lighting, so hey, more practice. I feel like both Air and Earth might need a few more iterations before they can look their best conceptually, but I think I was able to put my own twists on the characters in the end. I think they do feel like their own people. These were really fun characters to design. I feel like I got out of my comfort zone a bit with these ladies, but next time I think a little bit more iteration is in order, and I think I also should get out of my comfort zone with the genders and not just draw ladies all the time. Anyways, remember to let me know what you think these ladies should be named. I'll be choosing the names for all 4 in the next character design video. Hey, welcome to the end of the video.
You're still here? It's over. Go home.
Thanks for watching till the end. I hope you guys enjoyed watching the full team come together. They were very fun to design. I'm kind of thinking about doing other elemental concepts, so if you want to see kind of a part 3 to this video, please let me know. And a big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. If you want to support me and the channel, you can like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You know, do those YouTube things. When you do so, I love you for it, and the intimate love letters in my diary are living proof. But now if you'll excuse me, I have to go. I am very busy. I have to go and turn another abstract concept into a person, myself. Bye.